There's things like when I was in Shanghai, if somebody's pouring you a drink, then you knock on the table like this to say thank you. And they explained to me that a knocking is basically like kneeling to say thank you. When I was in Hong Kong, I was told as well is that if somebody comes with a drink to you, then you have to drink with them. You can't say no. And usually with some of this was like proper shots. And I was just like, okay. And then I realized that my granddad had actually taught me words in Swahili. So I was mixing Swahili and Punjabi, just the odd word, throwing it in. I didn't realize, but he was mixing languages and then I was mixing languages. The realization that, oh my God, that word is actually Swahili. It's not Punjabi. So
Hi, welcome back to Rooted and Routed podcast. My name is Sabiya Met, and I'm back with another guest, another story, which is interesting and which will make you think more than what you expected. Her story blends identity, leadership, discipline, and expression in ways we rarely have spoken in one conversation. Let me introduce Bindi Basan. Welcome, Bindi.
thank you, Sabiya. I'm really excited to be on the podcast today.
I'm happy to have you. I'm really excited because we know each other over a decade.
Yeah.
Really long. Really long. And never ever did I think that we would have something like this. I'm sure you didn't expect, I didn't expect. But here we are. And let us start with your background. Maybe you can tell about your background to the audience.
Yes, so my name's Bindi Basan, born and bred in England, but most of my career has taken me on international journeys, working around the world, which is one of the reasons why we met over a decade ago. I've predominantly worked in the tech industry in leadership roles. I've absolutely loved it. I had some fantastic opportunities. My current role is working with a business in retail, actually, luxury retail, and they're based in Singapore and Dubai. So I continue on my international experiences, and I'm also now got exposure to not only Asia Pacific, but also the UAE region now.
Lovely. That is interesting. And that's something I'm really interested to know more as we go on in the conversation. So, as you said, you're British. Okay. So you grew up with both the influences of British and Indian. How do you think that shaped the way you show up as a leader today?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So just set some context. I probably was not really aware of this when I was younger, but it's definitely come to light, the impact of that as I progressed through life. So you're absolutely right. Born and bred in Leeds, which is a city in Yorkshire, which we often call the paradise. Yorkshire's beautiful, and people will definitely pick up on the accent. But I am obviously Punjabi heritage, so Sikh. So yes, you're absolutely right. I've been rooted in more than one culture from childhood. And it's really interesting because you pick up certain values and principles and ways of thinking and nuances from both cultures. So what I've effectively done since childhood is look at every situation through multiple lenses, most often without realizing, because it's unconscious, because it's sort of things that I've picked up since childhood, and I've been doing it since childhood. So I would guess things like, I think the Punjabi culture has given me a lot of principles and values around community, family values, relationships, being Sikh, obviously things like service to others, really important, being fearless, being courageous. And the British culture is very much rooted in me in structure, governance, rules, accountability, results, and outcomes. So I think a blend of both those coming together. And to be honest, I don't even know how that is evolved and what I can't really say which element of me is British and which element of me is Punjabi. It's just sort of come together and it's formed as one. And I think what it does, and not just how I show up as a leader now, but probably evolved over the years with all my international experience, is the ability to adapt the ability to sort of be in a situation, land up in a situation, and I guess have the cultural intelligence to adapt to what's actually I'm set up in, recognize that there's diversity, recognize that people will be thinking differently, motivations will be different. But the most important thing is having the ability to bring people from all walks of life and different cultures to then drive outcomes for businesses. And because I've actually been rooted in more than one culture, I feel like it's always just come super naturally to me. I always end up in a situation with curiosity and a recognition that there's going to be differences. I think that, and that allows me to progress on that journey to effectively achieve outcomes for the businesses that I'm working for.
I think this is something I feel is a plus, isn't it? When you have been around different influences, not just India, with the travel as well, you start to adapt that one, right? So the influence just starts to become wider than just your home base, and that is a plus as a leadership. As we spoke about the previous experience in India, you lived in India as an expat, I think in 2007 or 8. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. 3 years, 4 years.
And that is an interesting thing, because having this Indian heritage at home, being Punjabi, that must have brought its own set of expectations and surprises. What was it like navigating a culture that you felt both familiar and still foreign at the same time?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think the different nuances of the culture that I've become also play out, right? So there's probably moments where I was probably being very British in that environment, and there's probably moments where I've been very Indian in that environment. Now, I did actually go to work in India prior to that stint, so I was an expat earlier than that as well. When I came out of university, in my first role, I think I was in the role for about a year, and I was asked to manage an offshore project. So I did actually go work in Mumbai for about 6 to 8 months, prior to this longer stint that I went back for. So basically, I think when that first instance, I went with its whole, like, there's no baggage, right? So it's like, how difficult can it be? I'm Indian heritage, of course, I've got it nailed, which wasn't the case. So the thing is, though, as individuals, we'll pick up on obvious differences, right? Language, food, you pick up on that all the time, right? Clothes. But it's the more ingrained that are so in depth and so part of our DNA, that those are the things that we take for granted, because it's on autopilot. And it's not until you come across somebody who does something different to you that you then realize, like, oh, okay, there's a difference here. So I guess for me, you're right. I mean, my friends also they were always joking around, and when they when they're wanting to be sarcastic, throwing some sarcasm, they'd just say, you British. they'd do all that, and I'd be like, hold on. And but the interesting thing for me, I think the biggest realization, and it doesn't just happen with my culture. I think anybody that's actually migrated, or their grandparents have moved from their original countries and moved, will experience this. So what happens is, my great grandparents left India way before independence. So my grandfather grew up in Africa. So they took with them India and the culture and even the language and how they spoke, how it was way before 1947, right? So it would have been 1930s. So that's the culture that then got passed down, right? So I grew up with my grandparents in the UK, and the culture and values that they instilled in me was the culture that they brought from India in the 1930s, probably, I guess, around that era. So when I went to India to work the first time, and my friends that I met at that point actually said that I was backwards, because India had moved on, so far ahead, but I was holding the Indian culture, or I was taught the Indian culture from years and years ago. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't do this? And what do you mean you don't believe in this? And I think that was probably the biggest difference for me. And it's not just me. I think if you speak to people like maybe Italians that moved to America in those early years, they hold on to their heritage. I've met people from Lebanon and Turkey who are based in Australia, and they go back to Lebanon or Turkey and they get told the same thing, like, which era are you living in? But the thing is, when you move out of your home countries, like a lot of people's grandparents, great-grandparents would have done, there's a fear of losing your identity, so they hold on to it very tightly, which means that what gets passed down isn't diluted because there's such a strong, I guess, like, I don't know, just like passion and such sort of this whole feeling of this is mine, so they hold on to it. Whereas I guess people that are growing up in India and evolving, the country's evolving, you move ahead with it, right? There's no fear of losing an identity because the country's evolving and you're just moving with it. But when you leave what you perceive as home, then you are holding on to that a lot tighter. So I think that was quite funny because it wasn't just differences from a cultural perspective, it was differences from almost like a time and era perspective as well. So yes, it was funny, but I guess the advantage that I also had, because I can speak Punjabi and Hindi, even though some people might think it's with an accent sometimes, I was able to converse in both languages. So I could, try to get away with not being charged too much by the rickshaw or something by speaking in Hindi. So that was quite good fun. But yes, it did. It was definitely different. But I think as my experiences also evolved, I think the biggest thing for me was that deep down, the human connection, regardless of our backgrounds, always surfaces. Yeah. So if you have that inner desire for curiosity, for learning, for connecting with people, then those differences sort of dilute. And they may surface at certain times when, like Independence Day, they might. I remember my friends used to say to me, but this is the day the British left the country, what are you still doing here? So I get those sort of jokes all the time. But generally, the friendships got so much more tighter because it was, by that time, you've crossed the boundaries of culture and nuances, and it's really about connection.
I think that is the time as well when we actually met for the first time. So can I tell you something, what I saw you, how I saw you?
Yeah.
So I'm a local and you're an expat, okay? And we are in this with our mutual friends. I saw you, indeed, somebody who looks brown, right? I mean, she can speak Hindi, but with an accent. And then in my mind, this is true, okay? In my mind, why does she have to speak with an accent? She knows Hindi, she can just speak Hindi the way it is. Why does she have to? And I didn't know exactly how, because I'm not in your shoes. So I didn't know, how do I look at you, somebody who's trying to fake it or somebody who's trying to just genuinely trying to understand between both these cultures, trying to fit in. And I was at that time just a local, right? So yeah, for me, that was an interesting thing to confront somebody who looks Indian, but not quite Indian.
But I think one of the things that I did notice, particularly when I was working in India, and then subsequently when I went to work on, like, in other parts of Asia, Singapore in particular, where I was working with like 10 nationalities in one team, is recognizing that how much of the cultural upbringing, cultural nuances play a part in the work situation. So that could be religious and basically the whole passion around festivities and the importance of all those festivals, especially in a country so diverse like India. But also, I think for me, it was the strong family values that played in work. And I'll tell you why, because I was dealing with teams that were based in the UK and in India at that particular time. Subsequently, then I went on to work with America as well. But we had situations where we wanted to allocate blocks of time during the day where two developers in a team would work together. Now, in the UK, when you're at work, generally when I used to go into the offices, you sort of get to work, your phone's probably in your bag, nobody's really calling you because you're at work. So if anybody's reaching out to you, they'll be reaching out to you after work. And that's just the norm. It's not even discussed because it's normal. But when I was working in India, the phones are going off and off and off. And I had Americans in my team when I was based in India. And when we had one of our retrospectives, it was actually flagged by the team. So this is an opportunity to say, what are we doing well? What do we want to improve? What do we want to change? And it was actually flagged by the team member, actually the American person, that said, look, I get very distracted because there's phones call coming in and we're supposed to have a dedicated 2-hour period where we're both working together. So for me, in that situation, it's basically opening up to the floor to try and get both perspectives, because I think both perspectives were valid, and it was about how do we come to a conclusion. So my team explained that, look, in India, if you're getting a call from your family, your mum, your wife, your children, you're picking that call up because they could be ringing about anything. And if they need help or they need assistance and you're not answering that phone, then that's not acceptable, right? It's not acceptable to ignore a family phone call. So the conclusion that we end up coming to, or the agreement, was that it's okay to answer phone calls because that's the way it is and that's the way the culture operates. But get on the phone and ask, is everything okay? Is it an emergency? If not, then, end the call within a few minutes and then ring them back when you have your break. So we sort of came to that sort of, I guess, agreement as a team, but it was stuff like that, right? It was just like where one culture may see that as super rude and your phone keeps going off, and other cultures like, well, this is just how it is, right? It's family values, people calling you from home or your close friends. They could need help or assistance, so you can't ignore a call. So it was really interesting because both perspectives were correct. And then for me, and this happened throughout my career because it wasn't just a one instance, where you then have to agree as a team what's acceptable and how do we want to move forward. But for me, the importance was that the agreement has to be on both parties. I never wanted to be in a situation where I am enforcing a particular way of working or believing, because I'm the leader, so you do what I say. I never wanted that. I wanted it to be a collective agreement, because then people have accountability, but they're also bought into the decision. I didn't want it to feel forced. There's no point trying to change the fundamentals of people's beliefs. Mm-hmm. It's about how do you work with them to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get it. It's absolutely something valuable, I think so, to come from that perspective, to come from that background. Yeah. I think also the fact that when you said, like, sometimes it happens that you felt like you were stuck in an era. I see that from the clothes. Okay. Sometimes when I see Indians or people who are connected with India abroad, the kind of outfits what they wear, as they call it, traditional, and in India we have moved on. It has gone to so much modern outfits that when I see it here, is quite the traditional work, right? Embellishments, they're quite from an era, literally. And the way they hold on to, even in UK, if you go to even in Belgium, in Antwerp, a couple of shops, what they have there, they seem to really have very traditional wear, but really old. And I don't know what is the reason. I think, as you said, the holding on to the identity is something very stronger. And modernizing is not something what they think is part of their identity, or maybe not prepared for evolving and moving on to modernism, more of Western thing. That's my
observation. And you have exposure. So, for example, I guess for me, because I spent so much time in India, I saw that evolution. Yeah. So that changed in terms of my style of wear that I would wear in Indian attire. I have friends who are in India who are stylists and also designers, or a hairstylist who worked with celebrities and stuff. So I had a lot of influence from that perspective. So that over time changed for me as well. But yes, and I think if you're holding on to something but then you haven't gone back to visit how things have evolved, then you stick in that. Yeah. And people are always so comfortable being close to things that they know, right? Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things about change often. And then even language. So, for example, I speak Punjabi, right? And I speak it fluently. And my friends in India that can speak Punjabi, I'll speak Punjabi. My friend Priti, for example, She'll often say, I don't understand your English accent, just speak Punjabi. So, but then I use the words in Punjabi as well, very pure Punjabi. So certain words that I would use, you don't use, you've replaced them with English words, So, like, I'll give you an example. So I say scissors. In Punjabi, we say Kainchi, and I still say Kainchi because that's what my grandma taught me. But my friend's like, oh my God, which era are you from saying that word? We say scissors. I was like, okay, but in the middle of a Punjabi sentence. So even my use of Punjabi words is very sort of, pure because of it would be like somebody in England now speaking like they're from, I don't know, the 1900s, right? Then you'd be like, oh, hold on, where are you from? And I think that's what happens just because of how I learned it. And the other added interest with me when I speak Punjabi is my grandfather grew up in Africa, so he spoke Swahili as well. So because I grew up with him in England, when I had my first encounter of actually speaking Punjabi with people that are not in England, they'd be like, "What are you saying?" And I was like, "I'm talking Punjabi. What do you mean? Don't you understand?" I'm like, "What's that word?" And then I realized that my granddad had actually taught me words in Swahili. So I was mixing Swahili and Punjabi, just the odd word, throwing it in. I didn't realize, but he'd obviously passed it down because he grew up in Africa. So for him, it was norm. So he was mixing languages, and then I was mixing languages. And then people are like, hold on. And then it literally was then the realization that, oh my God, that word is actually Swahili. It's not Punjabi. So that was quite interesting as well. But then it's just like all these different influences from everywhere that sort of combine, right?
So your grandparent also was a third culture kid. Can I say that? I mean, he also
Yeah.
two cultures, right?
Yeah. Both my grandparents and my granddad in particular, because he grew up in Africa, but obviously he was, his family's from Punjab.
Wow, interesting. That is really, that is really diverse, to be very honest, and to have a childhood like that has a lot of pluses, honestly. Yeah.
And bearing in mind that they then traveled, right? So India, Africa, UK. So I've also got that global movement heritage. Maybe what's influenced my career becoming that as well, because I grew up listening to my grandma's stories, right? So maybe it was always going to be inevitable that I would end up, traveling the world with work as a result.
And rooted in 3 different continents, isn't it, if you think of it?
Yeah, yes.
We are coming back to the work now, right? Have you ever had to hide or downplay parts of your identity at work? And if yes, what helped you reclaim your voice and lead more authentically?
I would say I probably definitely did when I was younger and early in my career. I think that's quite common I think it's even more common in children, right? Because when you are a child, you want to fit in. So you tend to hide away your differences, right? So in school, I'd want to be all British, right? No, I can't speak more than one language, and no, I don't eat different food. It was always like, yes, because I want to fit in, right? I want to be part of tribe, and that's normal. That's human behavior, right? And everybody does that around the world. When it came into the work front, I think I continued that. I just was really focused on the British aspect, especially in the workplace. And I possibly didn't really claim my full identity of being like multicultural and having an Indian heritage as well. I think that what happened was when I started working internationally and started meeting people from around the world, and their fascination in me was not just the British aspects. They were probably more fascinated in the Indian heritage, actually, because they see it as exotic, right? And they're like, wow. Because a lot of people that I met and continue to meet around the world, there's people that either judge you or not judge you, but they actually try to determine where you're from based on the visual. And then there's others that are vocal, right? So they'll hear and then they'll make assumptions or they'll see. And what I found was that I think with that curiosity from people that I was working with and meeting, I think then it sort of, to me, it just made sense to embrace myself as a whole And also the things that I was dealing with, I think it came to light that actually my strengths lie in being evidently and accepting the multiculturalism rather than trying to be, well, I'm British or I'm Punjabi, trying to be one or the other. So I think in the early days I definitely did, but that was I think driven from this desire to fit in, because you don't want to be excluded because you're different. And I think that's where it stemmed from. But then I realized as I got more and more experience and I'm meeting people and traveling that actually standing out is actually working to my advantage. And actually people are so intrigued in all the aspects and not just one. So I find it quite interesting because in the UK, people will think, okay, British Asian, obvious, right? In India, people will think, okay, they'll hear my accent, but they'll say Indian heritage easily. Everywhere else in the world, I get completely different perspectives. So I get Brazilian. Any island I go to, I get. I've had Caribbean. I've had Mauritius. I've Seychelles, Fijian. I've had so many different. I've had Turkish. So I have so many different. I guess experiences of people and what they think I am, apart from England and India. Those are probably the only two countries that recognise my heritage correctly. But everywhere else, often assume that I'm completely from a different country. Spanish I've had as well. So there's all sorts of stuff. It's really fascinating, and I think maybe I don't know what it is. Maybe I've got an international face, but that's quite interesting when you have that type of experience because then it's not even like people are not even assuming one or the other; they're assuming completely differently.
Yeah, I had the same experience. So I've had a couple of people telling me that I'm from Brazil. Somebody said I'm from Mexico, and somebody said from Colombia. Completely only Latin, right? And I literally asked one time, like, what made you say that I'm from Mexico? Because of your hair? Like, what's wrong with my hair? I mean, what my hair has to do with Mexico? Because then they have, some of them have curly hair, but so people in India have curly hair or wavy hair. So when it's interesting how what features people are looking at you and assuming you might be from that country without even me opening my mouth or listening to my accent, right? And when I said like this happened in US, okay, and this guy said, "Where are you from exactly?" I said, "I'm from India." "But you don't look Indian." Like, how does an Indian look? "But you're not wearing the bindi, okay?"
Okay.
And it's like, but not every Indian woman wear a bindi. Oh no, because we always thought so. But that conversation, and then that still continues to happen. That I have to really tell them that I'm an Indian, and it comes down to same again. Bindi, you're not wearing this. So how do it's a stereotype, isn't it? If you think of it, like you look at India, all people women wearing bindi. That's an
Yeah.
they're looking at probably, and yeah.
Yes. Yeah, totally. And I think if people don't have the exposure, then they're just going on based on the information that they've seen or somebody's disclosed to them, or these days, what social media portrays.
Yeah, there's no authenticity. I mean, not no, but it's hard to look into the authenticity of any information, image, or visuals that is passed on in the media. Yeah, it's hard. With the cultural agility, we touched on a point few weeks ago about how unconscious learning in your childhood, especially when exposed to multiple cultures, shape the way you lead in global business. And you gave an example of the shoes, removing of shoes when you're entering a house. Can you share that incident with the audience? Because that was an interesting one. Uh, if you
Yes.
didn't have been exposed to that aspect, then you would have, yeah, then the experience would have been different. But I think, yeah, as an expat, if somebody moves to India and doesn't know that you have to remove the shoes and just enters, and that whole reaction would be different, their experience would be different. But if you remove your shoes while entering the house in India, I think that the same is also in Asia, isn't it?
So it's different for me, right? Because I've got I guess you could say the Indian heritage side of me taught taught me about shoe removals, right? So in terms of when you enter houses, you remove your outdoor shoes and you put your indoor shoes on. But yes, I mean there's so many of those sort of experiences where it's not a common thing in the UK, so people will walk straight in with their outdoor shoes and not actually remove them. So yeah, those sort of experiences happened all the time. And I think for me, when I was traveling like more countries in Asia, just the certain etiquettes that had to be followed, both business and socially, was quite interesting. So when I was in Japan, the importance of bowing, and if you've got a guest that you've come to the office, you have to take them back to the lift, and you stay there until they've entered the lift and they go down. There's no. I remember the team saying to me, "Bindi, there's no handshaking going on in here." They were like, "Make sure you're bowing." And so they were teaching me all the etiquettes of how to greet clients, and there's certain behaviours that will be evident. I mean, Japan's a very consensus-driven society, so first of all, people are not designing themselves to stand out because it's very much about fitting in, and also because it's consensus driven, decisions can take longer because everybody has to be in agreement, or everybody has to have the opportunity to have a perspective and be able to express that. So a meeting that might have taken 30 minutes in England might take 2 hours in Japan. But that's the way that's very much a society based thing. Even simple things about how where people are sitting in the taxi, or where people sit in the meeting room. A lot of that heritage comes from the past, right? So the samurais would be the head would be furthest away from the door, because if they were attacked, then obviously everybody else is fighting before they get the reach, right? So so in terms of hierarchy and importance of where the important person sits, in a car, in a room, those sort of things are all things that I had to learn in terms of being able to operate in that country and build teams and work with people. Now, the advantage that I did have with Japan is that I did martial arts when I was younger. So I learned a lot about the culture in terms of respect, integrity, in terms of how you greet people with authority. So I learned that when I did martial arts when I was in my teenage years. And I also had the opportunity to go on an exchange visit in Japan. So all that knowledge that I learned, I was then able to apply when I actually went there on business to build teams. But there's still things that you have to learn. There's nuances. There's things like when I was in Shanghai, my team told me that if somebody's pouring you a drink, then you knock on the table like this to say thank you. Because most of these cultures, you don't actually pour your own drink, somebody's pouring it for you. Definitely in Japan, and there was moments in China where that was happening. And they explained to me that a knock-in is basically like kneeling to say thank you. So yeah, so it was things like that, and I think also in when I was in Hong Kong, I was told as well is that if somebody because usually circular tables and eating, if somebody comes with a drink to you, like gets up and actually comes to you, then you have to drink with them. You can't say no. And usually with some of this was like proper shots, and I was just like, okay, but there were so many nuances, and then there's differences in terms of some cultures are very non-confrontational, so there's all this, I don't know, things that aggravation that builds up because they don't want to confront, and then there's other cultures that's super direct, so I had to adapt to all that all the time, because I was jumping, I guess in that period when I was working, I was jumping India, Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, and Japan all at the same time every week. So I think eventually my brain just went on autopilot. It just knew, right, okay, I'm in Japan, this is how you behave. I'm in Australia now, it's different. So I think eventually over time that just evolved. It just became autopilot, and I just knew. But there's so many sort of etiquette moments, so many nuances that you learn along the way. But I think for me, the key one is that there's a beyond all of this, what I'm not calling it surface level, but like formalities and stuff like that and etiquette principles. There's something that's much more deeper, I find, like when I've traveled and worked internationally, there's moments of things where I can just sense it. I can sense like resistance in the room. I can sense when somebody's been offended. And this is when, without them saying anything, when there's nothing actually said, I can sense it. And I can sense how something might have made somebody feel, even if they're not from my culture. And I often was reflecting on that and why do I have that ability to do that? And that's because I've had to do it since childhood. I'm always in situations where, for example, if you meet somebody that's just grown up in one culture, they may say or do something that actually offends you on your other side of you, right? In terms of maybe my Indian heritage or maybe my British heritage, I might get offended or feel different, or they may may joke about something that like maybe an Indian person does, and I can feel it because I understand it, because it's like, but hold on, but I also do that, but I'm also British. So it's really weird to describe, but I sense it, I feel it. It's a feeling, and I'm really tuned into it. And it's happened so many times in my career when I've been in the room and I've just like thought, God, like, because I just know like that person said something and I know that that person's going to feel in a particular way. And if it's my team, it's easy, right? I can handle it because I can actually speak to them and address it and say, look, I think this situation happened. Let's have a conversation, make sure it didn't happen again. But if you're in a client meeting, or if you're in a meeting that's involving multiple departments or multiple companies, it's a little bit more difficult, right? Because I can sense it, but I'm not necessarily the driving force influencing that session, or maybe somebody else is leading it. So those sort of situations have happened endless times.
I think that is more about the intuition, right? There's something in the gut that you can't say it's like you can predict it, but you just know the flow of it, like a situation, a person reacts, and on that reaction, there's a reaction, and that should have been said in a differently. I think it happens with me as well. So among the expat circles here in the evenings when we're out, and let's say the small things like maybe having a word with the rickshaw wala, right? So the expats will speak to them with really a lot of politeness and respect, while the other guy is not really. He's like taken it with shock, like why somebody is trying to be so respectful, because my job is not seen in India as one of the top, whether it is paying for the tip or something, or even for the drivers, asking them, okay, their time, are you available? And then for us, it's more like he should be available because he's working, right? What is the need to even ask him? Just tell him that you have to go for a party or a dinner or whatnot. No, but I have to. I mean, it's also his family. So this kind of thing is something. So they're taken. The driver is quite shocked, but positively shocked.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this kind of nuances, and it takes a bit of intuition as well to look into that. And yeah, what you said is indeed right. You start to grow some sense of awareness towards this situation. Yeah. Well, when you're working with people from different cultures, like in your case, what's one common blind spot that you have seen in global leaders that they have done, and you catch hold of it, and how do you gently challenge it, if at all?
There's loads. So the thing is, everybody, doesn't matter which country they're from, believes that the rest of the world operates like them, right? You might think, oh yes, maybe okay, Sabiya's from India, but yeah, she has a different language and she eats different food and she dresses differently. But everything else, she were doing exactly the same as me, right, in terms of thought process. And we have that because you can see it evidently, and people don't even realize that. And some people, if you say, describe your culture to me, they can't even describe it because actually it's so ingrained. They're just doing what they think is right, or what they've been taught, so they don't even know that it's different to other people. So I think that what happens with a lot of that time, and to be honest, a lot of global leaders are usually dealing with highly important, sensitive, mission critical information or situations, or don't have time if they're executive leaders. So it's natural for them to turn up to a situation either on a meeting or, in person, and just assume the rest of the people in the room will understand the context of everything they're saying, and they will interpret everything that they say in exactly how they expect it. I said this, so you should understand this. Like, no, but have you thought that maybe if you say that, it might be interpreted differently because the cultural context is different? So that happens all the time, and I think it's a lot of it is because, and especially if you haven't had exposure globally, I think natural autopilot is to think. I don't think you think. I think you just do. You're just like this. Like, I mean, the biggest thing for me when I first came to India to work was I held the door open for people because that's what we do in England. And then the entire world is going through and nobody's saying thank you. And I'm still stood there holding the door for like 50 people that have gone through and then getting super annoyed and saying, how rude, how rude. And then you suddenly realize, right, that's okay, that's the way that it operates. So, but there's a natural, me holding the door open, I didn't think, oh, I must hold the door open. I did it because that's what I've been taught, right? So, or turning up to meetings on time because in the UK, time, right? And then soon learning that in places like India and possibly also in places like sometimes in the UAE as well, it's very much about what you're doing with the time, not arriving on time. So I would say global leaders, there's some of it might be due to time, but I think there's a lack of sometimes can be in terms of awareness of the culture that they're talking to, especially if you've got multiple cultures. So I'll give you a couple of examples where I probably have to step in. So I had a global leader that took over when I was running Asia Pacific and wanted to speak to my team about the changes he wanted to introduce. So I was going to report to this new director and didn't consult me in terms of this is what I'm planning to say. How do you think I should best deliver it to your team? Who's, by the way, in one of the most culturally complex regions in the entire world, right? So I've got people from from India all the way through to Australia on that call, and join the call, and they're presenting and talking, and I'm just like, my phone is pinging, my chats are pinging because my whole entire team is going crazy with the information that's being presented and the amount of damage control that I had to do after the call, and then speak to the director and say, look, I get what you're trying to say. I've got an Anglo-Saxon background, whatever. I understand how things operate in rule-based societies versus relationship-based societies. I've got that multicultural understanding. Totally get where you're coming from, but the way you deliver that message to the entire region just now has resulted in me doing a lot of damage control for you. So I explained it. They took on board all my feedback and then had another session and addressed the points that were. That was a natural thing of, right, okay, I'm going to speak to the team in Asia. Let's get them on a call. Let's do this with no, okay, this is what I'm about to say. Do you think it's going to land? So none of that discussion happened. Now, obviously, that incident meant that every time subsequent to that, when there was any sort of message delivery coming from the board, I was then involved, right? So then I could actually say, this is how I think how you should deliver the message. That's not going to be understood. Also, you get these people, sometimes you get a lot people in senior positions wanting to use all the fancy words, like the words that ChatGPT is always using. They want to deliver with that message. And I'm like, but you're talking to people where English isn't the first language, let's say Japan. There's no point using a big, massive word that's got 10 letters in it. Just simplify your language so that you deliver the message and they actually understand it, because that happens quite a bit. I think the other situation, it's probably two, but one, the number of times I've been in meetings where I've got the West on and I'm in the room with Asia or the East, you can say, and they're talking, and then they'll get to the end and they say, is everybody okay with any questions? And I'm sat in the room thinking, nobody in this room has actually understood anything that you've said. And I can see it. Not only can I sense it, I can see it in their body language. I can see it in their expressions. This has happened in Japan. It's happened in Hong Kong. It's happened in India with me. And I'm like thinking, they don't understand. And if I wasn't in the room, them saying no questions would have been, okay, then great. Thank you very much for your time. End the call. But I was in the room, so I stepped in and said, look, I step in and can say, I'm sorry, I don't think we've quite understood that. So can you go through this again? Is this what you mean and then I slow it down and repeat it because I've understood it, but I'm totally aware that the room has not. So then I was able to step in. That happened a few times in my career, actually several times, in that scenario, stepping in. I guess the other one that really stands out for me, because it just makes me laugh every time I think about it, is that so conversation style is really important. So in the UK, we hate silences, right? So if I stop talking, then you're probably going to start talking. Literally split second, you'll start talking because silence is awkward, right? In places like, the South American countries, like Latino, Spanish, Italian, they'll talk over each other, right? It's very much a very expressive language. In places like America, because it's a very individualistic society, people are quite dominant, want to stand out, so they'll keep talking, right? And there's probably never any gap. And then you've got places like in Asia, I think China in particular, where I stop talking, then there's a silence. People might be interpreting what I'm saying or just giving space, and then they'll start talking, and that's normal, right? So I remember during COVID, I was on a call with members of my team, so people from Hong Kong, Singapore, India, Australia, Japan, and then there was people from the UK and people from America on. And I knew that my team had some valid points to make, and they had some great ideas that they're working on with their customers. And I'm on the call, and first of all, the American people are talking, and they keep talking. They stop. The British jump in because they don't like silence, right? Stick for this way. I'm literally WhatsApping my team and saying, "Will you go off mute and talk?" And they're saying, "We're waiting for people to stop, Bindi." I went, "They're not stopping. They're not going to stop, right? So you have to step in because that's the way it is." And so you end up in this situation where one culture thinks the other culture doesn't have anything to contribute. You never talk on meetings. You're always quiet. These people are waiting for these people to shut up so they can talk. So in that situation, I basically went off mute and went, "Excuse me," I had to interrupt the person because they just wouldn't stop talking. "Excuse me, but so-and-so has a point. I'm just aware that the meeting's going to end soon. So can just express their perspective," and then they'll talk. But those sort of things happened all the time because people, again, it's not that they're being arrogant or ignorant, it's just doing what they do naturally, but not with a lack of awareness that you've got people on this call that potentially will be operating differently, and then you make assumptions about them because you did talk, so you have no ideas to contribute. You get that a lot. I get that a lot, and I'm like, hold on, these guys have loads of good ideas, but they're not getting the opportunity to talk.
Yeah, I think the same thing happens also off the professional environment. It happens also as in expat, right? Where you have it's Americans and the Britishers and the Asians, and when we are deciding, let's say, for a birthday gift for somebody, right?
Okay.
And the Americans start talking. "I have this idea, that we should do that." No pause, right? No pause. And the Asians do not speak. And what they want is, can you maybe ask us as well? And they are indeed waiting for the pause for when they finish, because out of respect, they will do that. And that I got to know much later of the discussion. And they were like, "Yeah, I mean, that's how it is in our culture, Sabiya. We wait for them to finish."
Yes.
Whether it's professional or even like an intimate one, a casual conversation. This thing is really important to understand the cultural context, because without the cultural context, it is just pure dominance, and I think it's also that leads to quite some misunderstanding and maybe poor business relations as well.